You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Hello.
You're not repeating it.
No.
I gave you a chance.
Discretion is the better part of valor.
You sent me a picture.
Yeah.
Of our children.
Yeah.
When they were, I don't know, my daughter must have been like 4. She's dressed as
4,
Batman. Yeah. Your son is dressed as a pirate. Your son loved dress up.
Oh, yeah.
And he had every manner of costume under the sun. I remember when he was a little kid. My kids used to love going over to your house
and go through his costumes.
And put on the costumes. But she's Batman. He's a pirate. They're standing there hugging each other. Yeah. And you sent me a note that said, we're looking at a future.
And you believe one's an engineer, one's a doctor.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. I felt bad last week. And my daughter, who is graduating medical school in 2 weeks, said, "Oh, you got to take a COVID test." I'm like, "I don't have COVID." And she's like, "You got to take a COVID test." And so she got in my head. And so I went out and got a COVID test. And I did not have COVID.
So as a medical professional, has she ever recommended that you get a cranial rectostomy?
No, but she has.
I want to talk to her about that.
She has recommended that I get a colonoscopy.
Yeah, well, that's a start.
She's adamant about my colonoscopy. So
you know that joke that every doctor that does those, every proctologist has heard. When you're going to get your colonoscopy, say, "Doctor, if you don't find my head, will you write a note and tell my wife?"
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. You would say you grew up in a dysfunctional family, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't think it's any secret to anybody who knows anything about me that I have proclaimed that for forever. And one of the things that we have often discussed on this show is that, but I don't know that we've put as fine a point on it as this, that when you grow up in dysfunctional households, there are certain skill sets that you learn as a result of that actually are very advantageous and are life enhancing in the environment that you grow up in, but may not necessarily be good for you to generalize to your life with the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so
it's kind of like I spent some time talking to people that had spent their career in the Navy, and people that had spent a career length of time in prisons. And they say you have to learn to survive within the system in which you find yourself, which doesn't necessarily become applicable to the larger society.
Right.
And so what this article is talking about is that there are things that you have to learn in order to survive in a dysfunctional family. And 15 years ago, they would have called it a codependent family.
Right.
Now the label has changed. Sell more books that way. And they're right. You do have to learn those skills, but they may not serve you well. And that's we spend a lot of time doing therapy with people who come from those backgrounds, who've learned those skills, who are trying to figure out, how do I get out of or away from my family of origin issues? And how do I not repeat into my full life and into the next generation of my children the lessons that I learned, the reality that I survived? And I think it's a very prominent use for therapy and a very good one.
Well, and I would argue that it is maybe perhaps not the exclusive use of therapy, but it is extremely common, even in those individuals who don't know that's why they're there. So the first thing you have to do is understand that these issues may come from your family of origin, and that's oftentimes a part of the process of therapy, is helping individuals understand where these messages that are playing in their head come from, because they don't even realize it.
Yeah, they may not hear them at a cognitive level.
Exactly.
A level of awareness. I remember when I was teaching at the university for people that wanted to be counselors, I would always make the point.
That was the name of the university?
Yeah.
For people that want to be counselors?
Absolutely. Desperately. I forgot that.
Yeah.
I would always make the point, if you are around a, quote, survivor, they will recognize that you also are a survivor. And as a therapist...
So tell me more about what you mean by a survivor.
Well, I say that in quotes. If you grew up in what we're now calling a dysfunctional family, what we used to call a codependent family, and before that we used to call an alcoholic family, you display certain tells, like playing poker. And other players will recognize you as a player because they'll see your tells. They'll sense it. One of the tells is hyper awareness, hyper vigilance. So if you're hyper vigilant, and hyper aware, other people who also are will spot that across a crowded room. Now, what I would go on to say, and I think it's a really important point for therapists to understand, or potential therapists to understand, they may know from your projections that you are a, quote, survivor from a dysfunctional family, but they won't know what it is that you have survived unless you tell them. So they may assume that you're a similar survivor, that you survived an alcoholic family. They may assume that you survived a sexual abuse family. They may assume that you survived a physically abusive family. They're not going to know unless you tell them, but they are going to know that you're a kindred spirit.
Right.
And you can use that awareness as a therapist to connect with them, but you have to remember the importance of boundaries. You're doing therapy with them on their issues, not on yours. And so you can't give too much information that changes the course of the conversation to be about you and what you survived, what your experience was.
Right.
Be very, very careful about those boundaries. It's a hard thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
In the helping professions at all, but it's a training skill that can be learned, that therapist training programs need to teach. How do you become aware of these things so that if you have a client that's presenting in this way, that you can support them and validate them and create the safe holding environment, but not cross into countertransference and not cross into oversharing of information that you shouldn't share. I mean, for instance, we were taught when we went through the programs and got our training, different theories about setting up your office. Don't have a lot of family pictures on the wall. Don't have personally important memorabilia sitting on the shelf. Don't have books that you're reading laying on your desk, because different clients facing different issues are going to hyper focus on those things, and they will learn things about you, and then or assume things about you, and then they'll present that to you as an invitation to discuss it. Oh, you have a dog. Oh, you have 2 children. Oh, you read this magazine. You read this book. What do you think about this book? And get you into a discussion that they are then leading to learn about you, rather than you trying to understand what that's all about.
And I think that your prohibition against the therapist getting seduced into that is so apropos. I remember when I was just starting out, I was just so convinced that me sharing my heartfelt pain and trauma was so helpful to my client, and really it had nothing to do with them getting better. It had to do with me feeling better.
Hello.
But and what I tell people is, when you start out, you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. You have to make those mistakes to learn and get better. And so it isn't judging.
You need supervision.
Yeah.
Because your supervisor will help spot those.
Sure. But I made those mistakes, and I learned, and I got better. And did people, in the first 1/3 of my career get the therapy that was as good as the last third of my career? Probably not.
Well, hopefully not.
But it was, but I still think I was doing good stuff. But I learned as a therapist. You're going to learn as a therapist, and that's okay. But there are two things that I wanted to react to, and the first one was this idea of awareness. We're going to talk about some of the things that are in this article because I think that they're really good points. Yeah. But they don't have awareness in there. But that is for me, the single most important thing that I got out of that dysfunctional family situation. I know when I was young that I could tell by the way that my dad's key hit the lock in the door whether it was safe to be in the room or not.
Right.
And how can you know stuff like that? I mean, it's just amazing. And in some ways, it's really, really great that you have that skill. But if you apply that in general to the population at large, you're going to drive yourself crazy.
Well, you exhaust yourself.
Exactly.
Your adaptive capacity for survival becomes more limited. Mm-hmm. You also have a repetition compulsion, which is an issue that a number of people suffer from. They start to get improvement or get better as they learn new skills or as they have somebody to talk to that doesn't dance the established dance. So if I'm a good therapist and you come to me, I'm not re-abusive by feeding back to you the same limiting messages that your family of origin gave to you. So I'm saying something different to you, like, well, but you are smart, or you are capable, or you could make that choice. Well, what if you didn't want to do that? How might you say that?
Right.
Well, that's not so bad, at least to my hearing. Have you tried that in the open market?
Which some therapists who have agendas, they fall into that. And I'm not calling
agenda
names.
Therapists are dangerous.
But, if you are with a therapist and that therapist is saying, oh, it was horrible the way that they
Men are
treated
pond
you.
scum. Don't you understand that, just generically?
Right.
Yeah. We've heard therapists say that. We've heard therapists say that.
I've had people in a class that I was in with you, other students, say that to me and had you have to give me feedback about that message, and that I appreciate a great deal. But I think one of the things, the second point that I wanted to make was that you're going to, when you come out of those situations, you're going to find a relationship that complements
the core elements. Yeah.
And it's important that you recognize that. And if you're in a relationship like that, that doesn't necessarily mean that relationship is untenable, but it means that if you don't figure out how to stop playing the game, you're just going to keep on playing the game.
So there was some data at one time, and it's like 20 years old, so I don't know if this numbers are still accurate. But the data was that a woman who is married to an alcoholic won't divorce him just because he's an alcoholic. 9 times out of 10. If she divorces him, it'll be for some other reason. Non-support, physically abusing the children, physically abusing her, something like that. But not just because he's a drunk. If she gets a divorce and she goes back in the market and she finds another husband to marry or man to be in a relationship with, 9 times out of 10, she'll get another alcoholic.
At least 9 out of 10.
When it happens, then she says, well, but I looked. I knew what to look for, and it wasn't there. Those signs weren't there. Why didn't I see?
Right.
And it's because she didn't know that she was dancing to a tune that was playing at a subliminal level that she couldn't hear. And the people she found attractive to date from a dating pool were on a channel that she didn't want to be on.
Right.
But she hadn't changed channels yet.
Right.
And in therapy, that's what we talked about.
Yeah.
If you go down to the convention center with 1,000 people around, you're only going to recognize as attractive or dateable somebody that, I might go out with him, people on a certain channel. And so there might be 200 people that you would recognize. They're all going to be dancing to the same music.
Right.
So we used to tell people, you need to think seriously about trying to date somebody that you aren't attracted to.
Exactly.
Because your attraction meter is to the wrong substance.
Right. And I use the language of you're a radio transmitter, they're radio receivers. Yeah. You're putting out a vibe on a certain frequency. And if you don't change the frequency, then everything is exactly the same. And so you do repeat those same kinds of characteristics.
So let's talk about the 5 lessons that this article talks about, because I think they're all of importance and significant. The first one is you learn as a child in a dysfunctional family that you have to forgive or ignore bad behavior. So you can't afford to remember it and carry it, because it's a raw wound and it keeps getting salt rubbed in it.
Right.
I remember as a child, my dad, who was a violent alcoholic, would come into my bedroom several times over the course of my childhood and urinate on the bed with me in the bed, because he thought he was in the bathroom. He was that drunk. But I had to get up and take a shower and change my sheets and all that. But I was never allowed to tell anybody about it, or to ask my father about it, or to say anything to him about it. It had to be ignored, as if it had not happened.
And so the thing about this first one that I think is important is that I'm going to read this off of the page. You must forgive or even ignore bad behavior unless it's yours.
Right.
And they don't have that unless it's yours. But I think that that's an important distinction to make.
Well, but the point is, it may not be your bad behavior. It may be the accusation gets thrown at you.
Right.
You aren't respectful to your mother.
Exactly.
And I'm going to slap you upside the head because you're not respectful to your mother. Even though I just knocked her to the floor. But I'm the man of the house and I have the right. But you can't do that. You won't talk to my wife that way, young man. Who in the hell do you think you are? You'll rue the day. So you get those messages, and what you learn is, well, I can't do it, but you can. And when you do it, I have to ignore it as if it didn't happen.
And then you get into relationships, and you're dancing the same dance, and then...
so then do you become the abuser that everybody's supposed to ignore the behavior?
Exactly.
Like, I
didn't have power when I was younger, so I'm going to claim that power now.
Or do you find a partner who will be the abuser to reenact the script from childhood that you have a chance now to modify? So you either match up with a partner who's going to treat you that way, or you're going to become the one who treats somebody else that way.
Exactly. So before we move to the second point, let's take our break and we'll come back and pick it up on the other side.
All right. One of the reasons that I want to participate in this show is because it gives me an opportunity to clinically review my understanding of what therapy is and how it works, especially for the consumer. So my hope is that we will find conversations that broaden my understanding of that.
And my hope is that we do that in a way that is useful but also entertaining for people, so that they want to listen, not only because they're getting good psychology information, but because they just enjoy the show.
Easy listening with an informational twist. So
that's a new tagline.
They're not sitting there going, huh?
Easy listening with an informational twist.
I'm really good at it. I'm a professional.
You're a professional. If it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. We have to get a cough button.
Yeah, or 7-second delay, because sometimes I curse.
Okay, we're back. You said something about cursing.
Yeah.
Did you feel the need to curse?
I felt for years that I was cursed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but now I'm better.
So the second point that's on this list of the things that you get out of growing up in a dysfunctional relationship or dysfunctional family is that relationships are painful. And I think that, that is ubiquitous in our society. We have songs that say love hurts.
And it does.
Love wounds, it scars, and
You can't fall in love or be in love without getting hurt at some point, because nobody can perfectly meet all your needs.
Right.
So that's just a given of reality. However, in these dysfunctional families, it's a much more sharp and salient message. You're going to get hurt.
And because in a dysfunctional family, what there is not is resolution.
I love you. That's why I have to beat you.
Exactly.
So make sure that you grow up strong and righteous.
In a healthy relationship, we can disagree. You and I don't agree about everything in the world.
About many things.
And yet we're good friends because we respect that each of us has the authority to have our own belief system, and that's okay. And it doesn't threaten us.
Michael, you have the right to be wrong.
Exactly.
Please continue.
And so in a relationship that is healthy, you have these situations that are disagreements that may even be painful, but there's a resolution. Somebody can say compassionately, I'm sorry if what I did hurt you. That never happens in a dysfunctional family.
Right.
No one ever apologizes. So what I would add to this
see what you made me do.
Exactly.
They don't say, I'm sorry I did that.
And so
they say, I did it because you made it happen, because you're the bad person.
My addition to this one would be relationships are painful unless you know how to apologize.
I think they're painful even if you know how to apologize.
But there's a resolution.
And there's progress.
Yeah.
There's growth. The curve gets higher as people learn and develop. But you have to learn new dancing skills, and that has to do with communication. So the first thing you have to do before you can communicate about it is learn about boundaries and learn about articulating boundaries. It makes me uncomfortable when you stand this close to me. And you can start. You always start whenever you try to learn a new skill like that out on the periphery somewhere. You don't come to the core relationship in your life and start confronting it straight up.
That's essential.
Yeah. So you learn, for instance, to say to somebody in the grocery store line, "Excuse me, but I was here first." Or you learn coping skills like, if you don't want to be too close to the person in front of you, get a basket and put it between the two of you so that you can regulate the distance.
Right.
And if you really are impacted by that, get a basket to put behind you.
Right. And so in therapy, somebody comes in and they say, "Oh, my partner does X, and this is how it hurts me." And you say to them, "Okay, how would it feel to confront them?" "Oh, that would feel, okay, then don't do that.
Right.
Go to the grocery store and practice these skills." It's really important to feel that out, because if you're just saying to your client, "Hey, go out there and hit that person with both barrels of your Get Better shotgun," and they'll understand.
So as a therapist, giving this very good advice, you have to remember, always remember, as a clinician, they're going to sabotage that advice and come back and accuse you of being wrong. Right. So you're going to tell them, don't go to grandma and confront grandma. You're not ready yet to do that. Or don't go to mom and confront mom. Learn to speak up in the office and say, "Excuse me, but can we talk about the fact that I'm allergic to your perfume? And I would appreciate it if you wouldn't wear that particular kind, or you wouldn't wear as much of it, or whatever you need to say." And they'll go straight to grandma and say, "Grandma, Billy molested me and you didn't protect me." And then grandma will crush them. And they'll come back and say, "You don't know what you're talking about. I know I'm paying you. You're not even a professional."
Yeah.
Because they will sabotage it.
Right.
Because they are ingrained with these messages from childhood. Stay with the dance. Stay with the program. Learn the things we're telling you. For instance, the third one, trust is not guaranteed in a relationship. I must be able to trust you. You have to learn that you can't trust me, although I'm going to tell you all the way down the road that you can't.
Right.
Until I get you set to the exact right point that I need you.
Right.
And then I'm going to jab you.
Right. My definition of an intimate relationship, which can be sexual but doesn't have to be, always has been that there has to be honesty, trust, and empathy for a relationship to be intimate. And if you then have learned that you can't trust in a relationship, you have been educated to believe that one of the very foundations of an intimate relationship is not something that you can believe in. That's an incredibly conflicting message.
So as a child growing up in these environments, I believe you learn to wear uniforms. You learn to wear masks.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Presentations in response to cueing. And so you can compartmentalize several distinct realities of yourself. And you learn to present those in different environments. So when you go to school, you're one person. When you go to work, you're another person. When you come home, you're the third person. And so depending on the triggers in the environment, you decide which suit of clothes to present. Hey, this is me. I'll laugh at your jokes. I'll tell your jokes. I'll smoke with you. I'll present myself to be slapped because I knew that you didn't like it when I put butter in the corn, and I forgot, and I put butter in the corn. So it's all right that you slapped me.
Or I passive aggressively put the butter in the corn because I knew you didn't. Now I'm going to pretend like I didn't know,
right.
But yeah.
Why me? So trust is not guaranteed in a relationship. They will promise that they are trustworthy, and they will accuse you of being inadequate because you can't trust.
And think of the cognitive dissonance that creates in the other partner. You know, this idea, you go into the relationship believing there has to be trust for it to be intimate, and then you can't trust it, and you know inherently that you can't trust it because that's how you've been educated. There's a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance.
That presumes that the other partner is coming to it from a healthy perspective. if you've done your job,
No, I'm just
right,
saying
you've
as the
selected
individual,
somebody that knows.
as the individual, it creates cognitive dissonance just by being educated that trust is not something that you can believe in.
Right.
I mean, it's just, when I think of how much anxiety that creates and unconsciously in a person, it's just almost unbearable.
So it reminds me of the super Christian who's a hypocrite. Mm-hmm. We learn how to present ourselves. Butter won't melt in my mouth. I say all the right things. And I stand up in outrage and say, oh my goodness, this is not acceptable. But at home, I behave differently. Inside the walls of my house, it's like road rage. You've been taught that you're not allowed to be violent. You're not allowed to be angry. You're not allowed to act out. But if you strap on the steel bullet and you're driving down the highway, there's a certain amount of anonymity that comes to you that you can indulge in those behaviors. And it's dangerous for you and for others. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the internet. As somebody that's anonymous, my profile on the web, I can say things that I don't have to be accountable for.
Right.
So I can say things that as a person standing 5 feet from you looking in your eyes, I wouldn't say in a way that I wouldn't say them. Mm-hmm. So those things all become part of that process. And when you're doing therapy, you have to say, can we explore these? And you try to pick the ones that are on the surface, that are more hearable, that are more manipulable, adaptive, and use those examples as ways to gather strength and practice skill sets so that when it's time to approach the deeper levels that are more painful and more frightening, you have a foundation. You have some anchors to hold on to in therapy that are teaching you, okay, I can afford to look at this. I can afford to say, well, maybe my parents were wrong. Maybe my father was at fault. Maybe it wasn't me.
And that's going to be asymptotic. So you're going to get close to that, and then you're going to back away from it, and then you're going to get close to it. Yeah. And so when you're doing therapy, you have to recognize that the client is going to approach being able to make that realization, and then they're going to back off.
So that's a reason to do role playing, and that's a reason to do rehearsal conversations. And as a therapist, you need to learn the clinical skills for doing both of those. So let's pretend that you're Julie and I'm Brad, and instead of whoever you actually are, and I will say to you what Brad would say. You say back to me what you think Julie ought to say.
Yeah.
So then you negotiate that dance to say to them, now, how do you hear that?
Yeah.
How does that feel? Are you afraid? Does it create anxiety?
That helps to create a different set, a different mindset. And it may be the first time that person's ever entertained that. They may have never even thought about that before. So number 4 is it's your fault, whatever it is, which is to me the corollary to number 1. So in number 1,
you're the reason our family's broken.
Yeah.
You're the reason we're in trouble. You're the reason Dad lost his job. You're the reason we can't pay the bills. There's so many of those messages.
In number 1, it's you must forgive bad behavior, and I said unless it's yours. And then number 4 is that extension to that. You get blamed for whatever is perceived
See what you made me do
to be the negative. And so we've oftentimes called that scapegoating. Virginia Satir was really into use that kind of language, that there's somebody in the family that's going to carry the pain, anxiety, and trauma of the family. And if you're that person, then you're going to carry all of the drama that's associated with the family, whether it's yours or not. And you just get indoctrinated into that, and you become complicit.
So Virginia Satir in her family systems theory says you are assigned or you seek roles to which you have been trained, for which you've been trained. So if you come to therapy and you say, you discover, I don't like my role, I think I want to change it. And in therapy, you learn to modify your presentation in the family. You come with a different script. You come with unacceptable or different answers. For the family to continue the way that they have, because they want to stay on the same course.
Homeostasis.
Somebody else will take on the role. So if angry mom is what everybody in the family is upset with, and an angry mom comes to therapy and learns not to present with that anger, then somebody else in the family will become angry. and the visible component of anger. And they'll start acting that way so that the rest of the family can just not change directions, but follow the curve around. So instead of angry mom, it's now angry brother acting out and being angry and causing, who created this problem. And then the family just goes right along smoothly. Nobody has to change. Nobody has to adapt because we know this dance and we'll take it on.
But in the therapeutic model, what you have to say to the client is you have the right to claim your identity. So if you've been sexually abused and everybody wants your abuser, who is your uncle, to come to Thanksgiving, you have the right to say, I'm not going to come.
Right.
Oh, but my mom it'll break her heart. Well, what's more important to you, being there for your mother who's not acknowledging your trauma, or is it worth re-traumatizing yourself to be in that environment? You have to have those conversations. And again, this is another place where the client is going to come close to that and then back off. Okay, yeah, I'm going to not go to Thanksgiving. Right. No, I'm going to go to Thanksgiving. Right. Okay, no, I'm not going to go to Thanksgiving. Yeah. And
so you give them permission. So do whatever you need to do at the moment.
Do whatever you need to do. And the therapy isn't about, because some agenda people will say, oh, you can't go to that Thanksgiving. Right. No, it isn't about whether you should go to Thanksgiving or not.
And the newspaper says, well, Uncle Billy molested Sarah. The other thing, I just drew a blank on what I was going to say. You just kept talking after signaling I wanted to talk.
You were signaling me, and I was just rolling over you like a steamroller.
There you go.
But I think that what we're talking about...
Oh, I know what I was going to say. If you're the person that changes the script for the family, because you now have gone to therapy and you're learning to present differently, one of the things that you have to learn, and one of the things that you have to accept, is that the family, the game players in the family, will now blame you and say it's all your fault.
Exactly.
Which goes back to this other lesson that we mentioned. You have to be at peace with that. And they say you're the cause the family's falling apart. You're the cause that Uncle Billy got arrested.
Right.
And so Aunt Sarah is now going to be alone. It's all your fault. No, it's Uncle Billy's fault because he molested me.
But it embodies number 5, which is you can't trust your family for support.
Yeah.
You're not going to get support when you decide to live your true narrative. People aren't going to support you because they want you to be able to repeat the dysfunctional messages that that family has become comfortable with. If you change that narrative, you're the bad guy.
So as a clinician, as a therapist, you have to learn to be a juggler. You are facing all these various agendas and issues that people bring to therapy, and you are helping them learn to juggle balls. And then somebody throws you a plate. You have to be able to catch a plate and work it into juggling the balls. And maybe
next
set some of the balls down.
Throw you a chainsaw.
Exactly. You have to be adaptable. You cannot be agenda-driven like a dog with a bone. Let's talk about drinking. Let's talk about smoking. Let's talk... You have to go where the client is able to go and ready to go. Yeah. Which means you have to use your hypervigilance skills that you learned in your dysfunctional family for good usages.
So hopefully that was helpful for people. As always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. We are begging everybody to, we're not too proud to beg, go to the YouTubes, find us on YouTube, Psych with Mike, subscribe to the channel there, find us on Apple Podcasts, and give us a rating and a comment. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.